And, oops, I'm on the wrong screen. There we go. And we're live, so the Hangout is now recording. Welcome, everybody, to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis.
And I am the captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team.
Look at that. Made captain this year. Congratulations.
My new shirt. I thought it was perfect. They do it for all of the houses.
Yeah?
But I figured this one was the best. Anyway, that's not what we're going to talk
about. Although I don't think they made a big point of it on the show, but it's true that Vince's last name is actually Sly. So it's on topic, except for the fact that, of course, he didn't do well this episode. So,
yeah.
And besides, what a weird, weirdly, just Vince Sly. His name is Vince Sly. That just, I don't know. I suppose it's fine to have a last name of Sly, but just, I don't know. Maybe Vincent Sly is his given name, because I'm just trying to imagine deliberately naming a kid something that has the S sound at the end of the first name and the beginning, so you have to have that Vince Sly. You have to do that weird, awkward pause in between.
Yeah. Or it's not really his last name, and it's just something that he's chosen.
Which also wouldn't surprise me. I actually listened to the Dalton Ross podcast interview with him earlier this afternoon, just because I was more curious than usual, I think, about what sorts of things he might have to say about the show, having seen it now, right? And he said about what I would expect, but we'll get more into that later, maybe.
Okay.
So we can probably just go ahead and get started at the beginning. I was interested that we didn't really get even any scenes at all of White Collar coming back to camp after Tribal Council.
I mean, we didn't get a lot of White Collar scenes at all, except for when they all got naked.
Yeah.
Which made it easy to predict who was going to not be, I knew at least, I felt like they were not going to be at Tribal Council again, because they gave us so much about blue and no color, and they had set up a couple of people on each that could potentially get voted out, but they did nothing on White Collar. Like, even when they did the scenes on White Collar of them getting naked, it wasn't like, oh, we need to get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty clear to me, at least. But yeah, so we didn't see any of them coming back, which was, again, a precursor to the rest, or foreshadowing for the rest of the episode, where we really didn't see much for them at all.
Mm-hmm. What we did see a lot of this time was catching and eating crabs, which I was just kind of interested in, just because I feel like it's not something we've typically seen a lot of, and so I wonder if it's just something different about the campsites they have this time, or the time of year they're doing it, that makes the crabs more plentiful and easier to catch.
Yeah. I would have to think that it is, because they've given a lot of time to crab catching.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I also can only just imagine that, if you're dealing with only rice and beans as your primary food source, that having the protein from the crabs, even if it's a lot of work to catch them and then pick out whatever little bits of meat you can get from a tiny crab like that, even still, I'm sure that makes a big difference compared to not having it.
Yeah.
But of course, we also, early on here, get Dan losing his underwear in the ocean and making a shirt loincloth.
On the one hand, I'm very glad that he lost those underwear. because I didn't want to spend however many weeks until they get their bathing suits or whatever watching him walk around in that, because it was pretty uncomfortable last week. We didn't really talk about it, but it was just like it was not something we needed.
Yep. His manties.
Yeah.
As he called them. Although the whole conversation of just him looking so weird with the shirt loincloth and them saying, like, does that just mean you don't have a shirt now? Aren't you going to get sunburned? And he's like, well, I can't raw dog in jeans. It would tear me apart.
Yeah. That part was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Because it seemed when she first said it, it seemed like such a reasonable solution. Like, we'll just cut the legs off your jeans. And he goes, he just looks at her like, I can't raw dog in jeans. It would tear me apart.
Yeah, that was just such a strange way to put it.
Yes.
Anyway, though, he continued even still with some of his weird, his weird, like, I'm going to underachieve in my social interactions deliberately. You know what I mean? Like, this idea of they're kind of questioning his clothing choices, and he's like, well, do you want me to quit? And everyone's just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Nobody said that.
Yeah.
We're just having a conversation here. You don't need to make everything life or death. And then Lindsay has a theory that he actually lost the underwear on purpose as just another way for people to pay attention to him because he was losing mileage on the trying to be funny thing that wasn't working.
Yeah. I thought that was a little bit of a reach.
Yeah. Seems unlikely to me that he would do it on purpose. The general feeling of him trying to attract attention to himself might be valid, but I don't think it would go as far as him deliberately losing his only pair of underwear in the beginning stages of a game like this. You know what I mean? It just seems like that'd be a pretty self-destructive way to
right, especially if his solution is going to have him get like sunburnt uncomfortably. Like, that's just not something he's going to do.
Yeah.
I did like also when, like, he is so over the top with some stuff. Like, oh, you really lost them in the ocean? They were torn off of me. Like, couldn't just say, yes, I really did.
What can I say? The ocean wanted them more than I did.
Yeah, so many other ways to put it, but he just got like so dramatic, like they were ripped from me. You know,
yeah, there was nothing I could have done.
This huge wave, and I had to brace myself, and just.
Yep. So in any case, when we do jump over to the white collar camp, they do finally succeed in getting fire on day 4. Of course, it's not as impressive an achievement given that they did get fire from the tribal council the night before. But at the least they've got it now, so that's something. Although just it's one of those things where it means they've been, I guess, just either doing without clean water for 3 days, or alternately they've just been drinking the dirty water anyway and crossing their fingers. And then, of course, we have Max talking about feeling like their tribe has got a lot of hindrances, but at the very least they have a nice beach. And I liked that the nudity thing that he did was so calculated. You know what I mean? It's, on the one hand, it's not to say that he isn't enjoying himself, but also just the idea that he's making sure he gets screen time. You know what I mean? That's what he's doing. He's being a character so that people pay attention to him.
Yeah, and alone time.
Yeah.
No one would come in the water with him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting, especially since he kind of he also claims he's like a tip of the hat to previous Survivor stars like Richard Hatch. I thought it was interesting that Tyler described it as a bit of a no-collar streak. Pun apparently not intended, because he didn't acknowledge it at all. But I thought it was interesting, though, that Tyler was kind of sharp, too, in the sense of saying he thinks that the being naked thing is a way to try to distract people from, like, oh, he's actually going to be playing a serious game, but he's doing antics like this to try to make us think that he's not playing a serious game.
Right, and that, he's so smart at the game, and by acting foolish, he, can catch them off guard.
Meanwhile, Shireen thinks Max is a trendsetter, and so she decides to make herself a trend follower. And I don't know. I wasn't sure what to think about that whole thing, but having the scene of her just talking to Tyler and Joaquin while they're trying not to look was pretty hilarious. She's just standing there trying to have a conversation, wearing no bottoms, and they're just kind of like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna watch that? That's fine.
Tyler's
you can go watch it over there. Yeah. Oh boy, yeah."
It's like, well, yeah,
That was pretty funny.
It was funny.
So, meanwhile, over at the No Collar Tribe, we have what becomes one of the primary conflicts of the episode, which is that Nina is feeling excluded from the other girls. Holly says she's trying to get to know Nina, but confesses some frustration that it's hard to deal with Nina's deafness. It was interesting that I feel like in the conflict between the two parties there, or rather, Jen and Holly. Which is it? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Holly. I felt like there was a little bit of fault on both sides. While my sympathy is more towards Nina in the sense that, like, the fact that she's deaf, I mean, she can't change that. You know what I mean? And some of the things that Jen and Holly were saying is like, well, you're not jumping into the conversations either. It's like, well, she's deaf. Like, if she's not looking at you, she doesn't even realize you're having a conversation to jump into.
Yep.
Well, and so I thought that it was interesting that Holly and Jen, they were being maybe inconsiderate, but it didn't seem like it was in a malicious way at all. It was more just a matter of not thinking about it and sort of almost feeling like, well, we wouldn't normally have to, make allowances for someone. But you also kind of want to just say, well, yeah, but she's deaf. It's only fair to make allowances for something like that. Hey, Luna, come on. So I thought that was interesting, the conflict there, because, they go skinny dipping and Nina's feeling excluded. They didn't even ask her, so she goes and confronts them. So, like, even though I think they were being inconsiderate, I also think that Nina was pretty quick to jump to the conclusion that they were deliberately excluding her, which doesn't really seem to be the case to me.
No.
I mean, we even saw the conversation between Jen and Holly just saying, like, we didn't ask her because we just assumed she wouldn't want to come. And so maybe that means that this tension will actually produce more positive results in the sense that they both kind of have a better understanding of where the others are coming from, maybe? Except that Nina didn't seem really prepared to listen to them apologize if they were even trying to.
Yeah, I mean, I came down on it the same way that you did. It's, yes, you have sympathy for Nina, and that they seemed quick to get frustrated, but at the same time, we did see Holly make attempts to like have a conversation, and it was difficult. And you know, when you're trying to do all these other things, like that's just another piece that you have to be concerned about, and you could see why it would frustrate them. And so we don't know that it just immediately frustrated them. I mean, Nina says they ignored her from day one, but
I suspect there's probably something also in that, you know, at one point in tribal council, Nina says she doesn't want to be that annoying person who's always going, what? Huh? What was that? Can you say that again? And I get that. I mean,
sorry.
That makes sense that would be something she's concerned about, and it's probably a realistic, reasonable concern. That, you know, a lot of people would not be used to dealing with that and might tend to get frustrated with it more quickly than get frustrated with her for something that's really not her fault. But at the same time, I wonder if her reluctance to be that person, as she says, is meaning that she does not, like she actually withdraws, she holds back from conversations sometimes when she would otherwise participate because she's worried about that.
Right, because in order for her to participate, she would have to have them clarify what exactly they were saying.
Yeah.
And so rather than have them clarify, she just elects not to participate.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so, yeah, just to sum it up, like, again, I said they were clearly frustrated with her. You have some sympathy for her, but I didn't really like her reaction to it. It just, and it seemed like the over-enthusiasm of building this brand of, like, no collar, blue collar, and white collar might have affected that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because she was coming into this like, oh, you know, I'm joining a thing where everyone's going to accept me, and they turn out to just be regular people. And when they get frustrated and they don't click with you and it's hard to have a conversation, they don't include you as much. That's just a normal thing. It doesn't matter if you're a free spirit or, you know, whatever the white collar, whatever you want to call that. You know, if you don't click, you don't click. And that doesn't make it okay for them to, like, mistreat her, but I didn't see anything that they did as, like you said, malicious. They seemed, as I think Will described, young, and that seemed to be more of the divide between them, is that they were young and she's older, more than we can hear and you're deaf. Like,
yeah.
So I didn't like that she, like, attributed it all to that, because the reality, the reason they didn't invite her is because she was older, not because she was deaf. They didn't just like hate her because she was deaf and not want to swim with her.
Right.
You know,
like I think
correct assumption. Anyway, go ahead.
We could make the case certainly that they were inconsiderate.
Yes.
But at the same time, I agree with you that she jumped to the conclusion that they were deliberately excluding her awfully quickly, and I think that, you know, in the interests of empathy and getting along with people who are different than you, you kind of have to make allowances both ways, right? You know, Nina, certainly, you know, we can have sympathy that she's used to dealing, you know, that awkwardness of feeling like it's an imposition when she has to ask people to repeat themselves, that feeling of being different, and we can empathize with that, but she also has to recognize that there are lots of people who are not used to dealing with that, and it's different, it's an adjustment for them. And I think she needs to be able to make allowances for that as well. And I don't know, I think there's probably some insecurity there too. because, which, again, is completely understandable. But at the same time, if she wants to be accepted, socially, she kind of has to be willing to put herself out there. And it sounds like sometimes she doesn't do that. She deliberately holds back because she doesn't want to be in imposition. It's a hard thing to parse, I think. So I feel like there's maybe some blame on both sides there, but I agree with you that I felt like Nina was overreacting, although it's also true, when we armchair survivor, we need to recognize how emotionally intense this experience they're going through is.
Yeah, I definitely thought that too, is that was my first reaction to it. Wasn't like, God, she's so weak, like what an overreactor. It was, wow, the buildup of everybody's going to be so inclusive and free-spirited, and the fact that they've been 5 days on low food and water and everybody's stressed has pushed her past where it is reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
I was more concerned about that than I was about, her fault in understanding how to like relate and be inclusive in that social situation. Was, if she's going to be like snapping like that at this, it's going to be hard for her to make it 39 days.
Yeah.
And not because they're going to vote her off, but she's just not going to physically or mentally make it if she's breaking down right now.
Well, and honestly, she would have been the one to go if not for Will getting creative this time. Even at this point in the episode, Will seems like a nice guy. You know what I mean? He's definitely he seems like a people pleaser, peacemaker type of guy. So he's trying to be like a shoulder for her to cry on, but in confessional, he also seems to kind of come to the conclusion that this is a Nina problem, not an other people problem. That, it's like, we can empathize with her and feel bad that she feels bad, but we also can kind of say, sometimes part of being, in a group of people is not taking immediate offense to things that were probably not intended to be offensive. So meanwhile, over at Blue Collar, we have Rodney feeling like Mike is too much of a taskmaster at camp. Says they need to work all the time. It's certainly true that we see a clip of Mike waking everybody up and saying, "All right, we got to get to work," and everyone else just kind of feeling like, "Really? Do we?" We get a little bit of fun with them playing sort of a makeshift basketball game with a crate and a coconut.
Yeah, and another clip there of Mike saying, like, "You need to go cook." And everybody being like, "Well, let her make her shot first," and kind of jokingly, like they were like, "Oh, yeah, after a shot," and he just keep getting frustrated. Like, while the other one we looked at and we said, well, there's two sides to this. I felt like Mike was a little. I think they were right. He was a little out of line with his like taskmaster stuff. Like, yes, they should be getting to work, but it's not like we've seen in past seasons where it's like a group of people laying around and a group of people working and then being critical of the people laying around. Like, they're messing around a little bit and they didn't want to get up first thing in the morning. Like, he seemed to be pushing a little hard to be like the work guy.
Right. Well, and like there's one moment too where, Rodney's talking about the firewood pile and saying, like, got a pretty big firewood pile already.
Yeah.
How much more do we have to get before we can hang out a little bit?
Yeah.
And again, it's sometimes hard to know from our perspective, how much Mike is being unreasonable and how much the others might be being lazy, because it's certainly it's a tough question. Like, for example, if you're on a tribe and you really do feel like everybody else is being lazy and work that is actually important is not getting done, and that might result in your tribe, not having enough food or not having enough water or having a poorly built shelter, I mean, that's a tricky question. It's like, well, how would you deal with that situation? But clearly, making everybody dislike you is probably not the best solution to the problem, even if you're right in your assessment.
Yes.
And I think there's probably questions about whether that's even right. One thing that I thought was interesting that Dalton Ross pointed out in his recap is that Mike was quick to try to evoke the whole blue-collar working spirit, which is, again, it's like you were saying, this idea that they've been divided into these tribes, how much of just the psychic baggage of those labels is playing into how they feel about what's happening. Clearly it is with Mike, because he's talking about, well, I'm the only one who's really got this blue-collar working spirit. But Dalton Ross made the good point of, like, to be fair, all of the others are kind of on vacation from their jobs. You know, so it's not like this is not a new job for them. This is like an exciting adventure that's different from their job.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the same.
Well, and I mean, that is true, and it's funny. I would also make the point that, like, when you pointed out that Rodney showed that there was plenty of firewood, their work ethic is clearly, like, paying off. Like, they have done everything, as far as we know, they've done everything they need to have a successful camp.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the point of needing to work extra hard? You know, they clearly, it was very clear that they weren't just screwing around all day long and everything was falling apart, or the producers would show us that. Like, we'd see edits of a falling down shelter, sparse firewood, a dead fire. None of that was happening. Like, right. So that work ethic clearly existed, but once they accomplished their task, which, if you want to go into the, you know, if we want to actually classify this as like the white collar, blue collar, no collar, from the blue collar perspective, once the task is done, you know, you punch the clock and go home.
Yeah, I mean, see, that's actually one of the interesting distinctions between white collar and blue collar that's a little different from the way that the show has spun those categories, is that traditionally when you think of someone working tons and tons of overtime, I feel like, at least in my own head, that seems more like someone who's not on an hourly wage ends up working a lot of overtime. Whereas there's more of an, you know, because, you know, the employer can sort of expect that without having to pay anything extra, right? Whereas blue collar, it's a little bit more of like, hey, my shift's done, I'll be back tomorrow. Which, again, is not universally true in any case, but it's just interesting that there are different expectations there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we're looking into the stereotypes, you know, you would say stereotypically a white-collar worker would have a harder time differentiating between job and leisure than a blue-collar. A blue-collar has a very clear job is X, home is Y, where white-collar you would see is more of, you would picture that as the person who's more always on their smartphone, checking their email even when they're at home, like relaxing. You know, a blue-collar, you're not, when you're at home, you're not also hairstyling or building whatever you're doing. Like, right. Again, using the stereotype, they separate that better. So it seemed odd to me that, like, he was so insistent that they should be working all the time when it looked like to me they had completed their work and they were, and the thing is, they were relaxing with a work ethic to it. You know, it wasn't like they were all laying around. Like, they were doing something active. You know, they had built a basketball hoop and playing it like that. There was some work ethic involved in doing that towards a different end.
Well, I think all they really did was take a crate that they had already and put it in a tree. But
I'm not saying they engineered something, but they
no, okay,
they did, instead of just saying, "Oh, we're done. Let's lay around until it's time to go swim and then lay around some more." Like, said, "Well, okay, our job is done. What can we do?"
Yeah, you get all it's teamwork. It's bonding. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I thought they were all in the right. I thought they were, you know, he was out of line calling himself the only one who fits that stereotype, because I felt like they all actually fit that stereotype better.
Mm-hmm.
which was what I was getting at there. And I just thought, again, I thought they were fine. He was a little bit out of line, but not to the point where it was going to be like, I dislike him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was just, yeah.
Yeah. Well, for the benefit of the viewers, Mike told me in advance that he didn't see the scenes from Next Time. And so I will go ahead and let you know, Mike, that the scenes from Next Time indicate that that trend continues in the sense of him feeling like nobody else is doing any work and he gets mad and that they resent him for being mad when they think he's being unreasonable. So that actually continues. So meanwhile, over at No Collar, we have a different flavor of resentment building in the sense that Vince feels like Joe is getting credit for doing everything even when Vince is doing a lot of things too. And that sparks a weird conversation where he seems to just demand that Joe acknowledge that, yes, Vince is actually also doing things.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah. One of the things that Vince said in his post-show interview that I listened to with Dalton Ross is he insisted that the jealousy of Joe thing was really just not in his head at all. He didn't think of it that way, but he sees how it could be edited to present that impression, and I think that's nonsense. As a lot of the stuff he said, I think was, which we can talk more about as the various items come up, but him sort of feeling like he doesn't want Joe to be the leader, and yet his response to that is to demand that Joe acknowledge all the hard work he's doing. That's a kind of a weird, backwards sort of way to go about it. Did I lose you? It looks like your video is frozen. Uh-oh. I think we may have some connection issues, because right now I see... Oops, I just realized also that I had had it clicked so that it was showing only Mike all that time. But so right now I'm hoping that Mike will come back, because right now it looks like the connection may have been a little bit frozen. But just to keep the discussion going, I felt that it was a little bit strange for Vince to deal with this. Like, if his feeling is that Joe isn't really the leader, it's a strange response to act like Joe is the one that therefore has to acknowledge. That's like a default acknowledgement that Joe is the one whose opinion matters. Let's see. I'm going to try to kind of boot Mike temporarily and see if I can bring him back. All right. Just because I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, so I've re-invited Mike back into the call. So in any case, as just to continue the discussion, because of course the show must go on, Will acknowledges that the tension between Joe and Vince, with both of them kind of trying to be the alpha, is making things kind of uncomfortable at camp, which we can totally imagine how it would be. And at least as far as my own perception goes, this is all on Vince being kind of a weirdo, a little bit intense, because Joe seems to be a fairly easygoing, easy to get along with sort of guy, and it's not clear why Vince was insisting on there being this tension between them. And so in this conversation, it seems to me that we have another example like last week with Jen, where what Vince does is he kind of gets really intense with someone and bullies them into saying what he wants to hear, and then doesn't believe them when they say it, and now they can't be trusted. Let's see. Got a message from, Mike texted me to say, I think my internet hiccuped. All right, so hopefully we'll be getting him back directly. But yeah, so this idea that what Vince seems to do is get in somebody's face and sort of ask them leading questions in such an intense way that people sort of like start trying to tell him just what he wants to hear so that he'll leave them alone. But he is able to tell that that's what they're doing and therefore concludes that he can't trust them when he has really provoked that whole dynamic. So in the meantime, Nina, though, is bonding with him because he's the one that is actually taking the time to listen to her and to empathize with her. And so she says that she is with him and Will, and the idea is that it's those three against the other three of Hallie, Jen, and Joe, who are the three younger people. But one of the other things that came up in the interview is that Vince said that while he didn't start the tension between Nina and the other girls, he did recognize it and deliberately pushed a wedge in. He encouraged Nina to believe that it was a malicious exclusion. Let's see. All right, so Mike is having trouble reconnecting to his internet, but hopefully we'll be able to bring him back soon. I apologize, everybody, for this awkwardness here, but this is the nature of these live recordings sometimes. I'm telling Mike that he says, my phone has reconnected to Wi-Fi, but my comp is struggling. And I'm telling him, I'll ping a new invite. If you need to reboot or something. All right. Okay. So, all right. In the meantime, though, Joe, Holly, and Jen are discussing that Vince is kind of an intense, paranoid character, and that he is potentially dangerous, if not as a person, then certainly in the game, because he might do unpredictable things. And yet, strong in challenges, so you might hesitate to vote him out on that basis because, you need him for challenges. So I'm trying again with another invite here. So this brings us to the challenge. And it's a water-based challenge, which longtime listeners will know that I'm a fan of. I like the water challenges. Mike, incidentally, is going to be moving to Austin soon, as in I believe it's happening this month. But one he just texted to me is, I bet the internet, let's see if, oops. It's not. I bet the internet is amazing in Austin, and we will never have this issue again. So the challenge is for immunity, and then the last time, there's also a reward. It's a fishing kit, a big one for the first place finisher and a smaller one for the second place finisher. Third place, of course, gets no fishing kit. They get to go to tribal council. Because two of the tribes have one extra person, they have to sit someone out, and everybody immediately first assumes that Dan, as an older, heavier gentleman, is going to be the one to sit out for the blue collar, but he insists that he wants to do it, and he promises to surprise people. That's something that frequently is, when someone promises to surprise you, often they fail to do so. But in this case, who knew, right? Dan actually did really well in his leg of the challenge. So good for him. And I think he probably earned some significant points from his teammates as a result. I think if he continues to be really annoying, socially and at camp, that doing better than everybody expected in one challenge is not going to save him. But at the same time, sure doesn't hurt. So Vince does pretty well in his phase of the challenge, but then oddly has so much trouble just getting out of the water that both of the other tribes pass him. Mike also says, or maybe my provider knows I'm leaving and is sabotaging all my systems. I'm telling him, I'm reading your messages on the show. Because who knows, if they do know he's moving, they might just try to mess with his internet. Either that or it's just good old-fashioned poor customer service. So the lead is traded back and forth quite a few times in this challenge, with one team pulling ahead and then losing the lead. But certainly when Will gets his turn in the second obstacle, where it's the horizontal matrix that has to, you have to duck under the water to move the float around. He's very slow at that. He's clearly exhausted and kind of panicking. So he takes so much time that he basically takes that tribe almost out of the challenge completely. The other tribes get a substantial lead on them, which is a shame. Doesn't look good for Will. But of course, as we've certainly seen on Survivor many, many times, doing poorly on one challenge certainly does not automatically mean that you're going to be in trouble. For example, we saw Serene do poorly in the challenge the last time, and yet she did not, although her name was mentioned for voting out, she wasn't the one that actually got voted out. So now that said, repeated poor performance could be an issue. So let's see. At that point, though, we end up with white collar actually getting to start shooting the balls first. So Mike says, remind them that the same provider does my satellite, and the DVR was fucked up last night, he says. Well, so I don't know if that focused properly. But so he had mentioned that he tried to DVR Survivor last night and ended up having to watch it on the website because it messed that up too. So more evidence to support his sabotage theory. I'm continuing the discussion. Well, wait. I'm continuing the discussion while we wait, but how's it going? Not allowed to join the call. Uh-oh. Let's see. Let me send him a new... Invite. So I'm saying you had this issue before and eventually figured it out, didn't you? Because I believe what we had in the early days of us trying to do these Hangouts is I would send him the invite and he would try to join the call and it would say he doesn't have permission to join the call. So let's see if there's anything I can do. All right, let's see. He says he doesn't remember how he solved it the last time. Okay. Help. Dear Internet, how do we make this work? All right, so this is all fascinating, I'm sure. I apologize, everybody. Usually, if you're a regular viewer, you know that we have things a little bit more under control than this. Sometimes we have a late start, but I'm not sure how to do anything differently other than, without restarting the call. Let's see. He says he's definitely connected but can't join. I think he's probably getting the invite and yet it won't let him. Okay, so oh, you know what? I wonder if it's because I had to eject him earlier. Let's see. I wouldn't think so. I mean, surely it would give me an option to fix that. Arg. So let's see. The perils of live podcast broadcasting. So I'm getting lots of colorful messages from him as he tries and fails to rejoin. I'm telling him, he said, tried joining through Gmail on that invite, which is what I thought worked last time. I'm telling him I can't think what else to try without stopping the broadcast. And restarting, which I really don't want to do because it'll totally mess up the YouTube and all of that other stuff. But at some point, if we need to do it to continue the show, that's what we'll do. Let's see. And let's see. trying sending a quiet invite. But yeah, so, usually this works a little better than it seems to be right now. But, oh, look, there's my name. I'm playing around with various different settings. Yeah, so, I'm not sure. I think what we might have to do is, yeah, I think we're going to have to do that. So I think everybody, if you've been watching thus far, thank you very much. I am going to have to stop this one and start a new one, and I hope you will join me. If you need it, you should be able to find the new link. The new link on both my Twitter at Christiana Ellis and on my Google Plus page, which is presumably how you found it this time. So we shall be right back.